Everybody, and welcome to the Infoverse, the infinite universe of the Infomancer. This is the Infomancer speaking, and today I have a video that is a little different than the videos I have been uploading. Lately I have been uploading the Races of Thorol videos, and in those videos I have been talking about the different races that are in the fantasy novel I am writing. This video, however, has nothing to do with the fantasy novel I've been writing. However, it has to do with history, some legend and speculation. Specifically, I am talking about a Norse legend in this video. It's got no bearing on any of my writings. However, I just find these things interesting. I have many interests, and that is why this is the Infoverse, the infinite place where anything can happen. I am the Infomancer who will allow anything to happen, and in this case I am going to talk about an interest in a legend that I have looked into. And it's about a Norse warrior who is known as the Unnamed Viking. And the Unnamed Viking is actually completely unnamed. We don't know who they were or anything, and where we know them from is the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066 AD. And this was a battle between Kings Harold and Hadrad. Hadrad was a Viking leader, and Harold was the British king of the time. Hadrad infiltrated England from the north and took over York and the area around it. And Stamford Bridge was a short distance away from York, which is where the battle, where the Nameless Viking is known from, took place. And Hadrad took over this area, and his soldiers left their armor at the ships with some of their soldiers who were to bring it later because it was hot and they didn't want to bring it with them. And they figured that Harold, who faced constant threat from the south, would not go that far north to confront them, and they thought they would be safe. This turned out to be a belief that was completely detrimental and disastrous, because in fact Harold did go that far north, and the fact that they had no armor led to the decimation of these troops. In fact, at the end, 1,000 Vikings sailed away on their ships out of 9,000 Vikings that had left on the campaign. So that means they lost a staggering 8,000 out of 9,000 men. As for the British that fought them, they numbered 15,000, and the numbers for their losses range from 3,000 to 5,000 depending on the source. So they didn't lose nearly as many men. And this is because they were better armored. I mean, yes, they had superior numbers and that was a part of it, but they had armor, and their enemies did not, or most of them didn't actually. Later on, those troops that were supposed to bring armor did show up. However, it was too late to turn the tide of battle. Yes, they were armed and armored and were able to help, and that's why 1,000 of them lived. However, they weren't able to do enough to change the tide of the war. But this isn't a story about or a video about the Battle of Stamford Bridge. This is a video about a specific warrior in this battle. Now, when Hadrad saw Harold approaching, he had men on the far side of the river, and they bravely fought to their death against the approaching British. And Hadrad retreated behind the bridge, which was the only barrier between him and the approaching army, and his men started setting up defensive lines and doing what they could without their armor and with limited arms. However, they knew that their men on the other side of the bridge were getting butchered, and it was only a matter of time. So Hadrad sent his finest warrior to go and guard the bridge, and this warrior is the Unnamed Viking at Stamford Bridge. He was a berserker, dressed in his full armor, and having drank his potion was in a battle rage, and he was tasked with guarding the bridge. He was given permission from Hadrad to die in the service of this war and his people, and to ascend to the halls of Valhalla the home of the Valkyries and warriors of the Norse people. And he did this job really well. Remember, I said the British army numbered not 5,000, 15,000, and he was a single man sent to guard this bridge. And he did, in fact, stall the British army. He held them long enough for the Vikings to set up their defensive lines. In the end, it was all for naught, as the Vikings lost. However, he did a very good job of the task he was given to do. Now, we don't know what the size of this bridge was, and this leads to some speculations, and I'm going to get into that. But the story goes that he guarded this bridge, and the British sent man after man to confront him and try to get past him, and nobody could get past his deadly axe. He was invincible. It was said that he took several blows that should have felled a lesser man, and he took them without grimace, without wince, nothing, and he just kept hacking. Single strokes of his axe would cut down men. And it is said that he alone killed 40 of the British soldiers. Single-handedly in his holding of the bridge, he killed 40 of the enemy soldiers. And they couldn't get past him while he was alive. They couldn't cut him down in normal battle. 40 of their men died. So how they eventually defeated him was a soldier rode underneath the bridge he was guarding and stabbed up through the planks with his spear and hit him in his groin, a completely unguarded, undefended, unarmored area. And when he did this, of course, if you were stabbed in the groin, you'd fall. So did the Viking berserker. And he didn't die from that, actually. He was finished off with a blow to the back of the head by some soldier as they crossed the bridge after he had fallen from being stabbed in his genitals. And that's how they killed him, was they had to use an underhanded method. They couldn't defeat him in open battle because he was just too powerful. And I actually think that the Unnamed Viking is very, very interesting. There's an anime called Fate Stay Night, which has different classes of warriors. There's also Fate Zero, Fate Apocrypha. Those are the animes. There's other things that aren't animes. However, the Unnamed Viking has not been in any of them, and I feel that he should, because he is an actual berserker, and a berserker is one of their classes. But I've gotten off topic. I apologize for that. Anyways, there is some speculations about the accuracy of this story. I mean, he held off 15,000 men single-handedly for quite a while and killed 40 of them, wounded many others, and took several blows that should have killed him and just kept going. Some people wonder about the validity of this story and if there's any truth to it at all. Some people say that the lone Viking might not exist at all, but was just a story fabricated to to embellish the might of the Vikings and make their British victory over them all that much more important and seem that much more impressive. However, there are other theories. One theory is that, as I said, we don't know the width of the bridge, so this might have been a narrow bridge designed for single-file crossing, and if that's the case, then they would have been forced to fight him in single combat one at a time, and if he's a very skilled, superior warrior, they had just marched for 4 days and were very tired, the British army, I mean, the British soldiers, and so I could see him defeating them, 40 soldiers, all one after the other in single combat. Is it very likely? No. Is it possible? Yeah, completely. Stranger things have happened. So that is one possibility. Some people say that there is no way this was a bridge that was for single file crossing. It couldn't be that narrow because you need to be able to get goods and stuff across. And that is a possibility. It might not have been a narrow single-file bridge. We don't have any records of the size of this bridge. We don't know. And so it could have been wider. And if it's wider, that makes it much less likely that a single man was able to hold it off against 15,000 soldiers. However, that leads to a different speculation, and this is what some people think, is that perhaps the Unnamed Viking is an embellishment of a platoon of Vikings, or I don't know that platoon is the right word. I'm not overly familiar with the jargon, the slang, whatever. but a group of Vikings. And if there was a group, however many, 10, 15, 20, guarding a bridge that was bigger, that would be completely possible to hold off if it was wide enough for carts and stuff to go over. You would need more men to cover it, and that's possible. And as far as why it became a single Viking that held it, well, just like with the earlier story or theory with if he didn't exist, perhaps this entire group of Vikings was embellished to become a single Viking to make the impressive victory over the Vikings that much more impressive, because if their warriors are able to hold off against 15,000 men single-handedly, that's a lot better than if a platoon guarded the bridge, right? Yeah, it seems much more impressive. Makes the Vikings look better, it makes you look better for beating them. So this is a very good possibility. I could see this being the case. This is not the only theory, though. Like I said, there's the fact that if it's a narrow bridge, it's that, or that it doesn't exist at all. That he never existed at all. That he was several people. That he just guarded a narrow bridge. And there may be other theories out there that I haven't read up on. I'm not a historian. I'm not an expert, nothing like that. I just looked this stuff up out of a casual interest. And I found it very interesting what I read about it, and I wanted to share those with you and see what you guys thought. I tend to lean towards the idea that it was a narrow bridge that he guarded, and if it wasn't a narrow bridge, because I could very well see it had to be wider for carts, but I think they could have set up other bridges, on busier roads or whatever, less direct paths that the merchants could take their carts on or whatever. And this bridge could have just been a foot travel bridge. We don't know. I tend to believe that it was a narrow foot travel bridge and could have been defended by a single warrior who was very good, because he was up against exhausted soldiers, and if he's good and against exhausted soldiers, he could do it. And I do believe that it's possible. Like I said, it's not overly likely. It's an impressive feat, but completely possible, and that's where I lean towards. If that's not the case, however, I don't believe that he just didn't exist. I don't believe this story came out of nowhere, that someone just came up with it. So then I believe that if it wasn't just a single soldier, it had to have been a group of Vikings that were later changed into one Viking through the stories and the sagas. But I could see that a lot of people would say, yeah, that's probably the more likely possibility. And I agree to you to some extent, but just my own personal beliefs off of what I've read, that's what I feel. And based off of what I've told you, and perhaps any research you do on your own because of interest I've sparked in you with this video, you may come to the same conclusions or different conclusions. I'd be curious to know what you think about it. And hopefully you've learned something here. That is my hope, and hopefully you found this video entertaining. I will see you guys next time here at the Infoverse, and you have a good one.